The events take place in Bogota, Colombia, at the offices of Belco Industries, which employs mostly American and other foreign staff. The plot tells the story of 80 employees who find themselves trapped in a brutal social experiment. To survive, they will have to hunt each other, following the rules and orders of their unknown boss. It all started as a normal working day. Employees arrive at the office but notice something strange. Security guards at the entrance carefully check documents and only allow certain employees to enter. This causes surprise, but no one suspects anything bad. The Belco company implants tracking chips under the skin of its employees during recruitment, explaining this as a security measure since thousands of people are kidnapped every year in Colombia. Office worker Mike Milch bought a funny toy corn cob from a street vendor on his way to work and happily showed it to his new girlfriend Leandra, who also works at Belco. Her colleague Wendell constantly stares at her, and she has repeatedly made comments to him about it, but he continues to behave inappropriately. Leandra closed the window so that no one could see her and Mike kissing. However, Barry Norris, chief operating officer, came in with work questions and noticed them anyway. Colleagues meet the new girl, Denny, jokingly emphasizing that normal people don't work at Belco. Suddenly, Mike notices that there are suspiciously few people in the office today. He learns that during a check at the entrance, the local Colombians were sent home, and only foreigners remained at work. Mike sat down to work at his computer when he suddenly saw one of the new, unfamiliar security guards through the window, heading toward the hangar. This alarmed him. He called the security department to ask his colleague who had sent the Colombians home, and why those unfriendly armed men had gathered in the hangar. The local security guard said he didn't know the reasons. They had simply received orders from headquarters, which they were all following. Suddenly, a loud noise interrupted the conversation. An unknown, hostile voice, audible in every room of the building, announced that,
"In 8 hours, most of you will be dead."
He ordered them to follow his instructions to increase their chances of survival. The first task was to eliminate 2 colleagues within the next half hour. Some employees did not take it seriously, considering it a cruel joke. But the unknown voice continued. If they did not carry out the order in half an hour, the consequences would be dire. One of those who took the message seriously suggested evacuating via the stairs. When one of the female employees rushed to the window, it closed with a metal shield. The entire building had turned into a sealed metal trap, and it was impossible to call anyone. Technical workers Bud and Lonnie discussed possible actions with Mike, and finally decided that the only thing left to do was to try to melt the metal with a gas soldering iron. Director Barry tries to calm people down, saying that this is most likely just a security measure or a cruel prank, and he intends to find out everything from management. But obviously no one is answering him. Some people went up to the roof, but no one will notice them for at least a few kilometers. Meanwhile, Bud and Lonnie's efforts are in vain. They have no idea what kind of metal this is that is completely resistant to the soldering iron. Mike shared his thoughts with Barry that the situation was serious and that he had seen armed security forces gathering in a hangar near the office, and he feared the worst. Barry simply called Mike a panic monger, not believing him. People on the roof saw the security guard at the gate, the same one who had been checking cars in the morning, but when they shouted for help, he calmly sipped his coffee. One of the employees remembered the contract he had signed when he was hired, which stated that the company could do literally anything with its employees. He thought that perhaps this was just a test of trust from management. His excessive calm was suddenly interrupted by a shot. The bullet hit his colleague standing next to him. Explosions also occurred in the central hall. In total, some people had already lost their lives, but as it turned out, this was not caused by gunshots. Barry examined the man's body. His head had been blown apart. Remember, all Belco employees had chips implanted when they were hired, and this is what they were for. That's why the local Colombians were turned away at the entrance, because they didn't have these devices. Without saying anything to his girlfriend, Mike grabbed a stationary knife and locked himself in the bathroom. Leandra banged on the door while Mike tried to cut the chip out of his skin. Suddenly, a voice commanded him to stop immediately, otherwise the chip would explode. While the stranger counted aloud to 10, Mike, although he wanted to rip out the chip, gave up and threw down the knife. Later, a colleague stitched up his wound, and Leandra went to get some ice. Wendell, who had previously been pursuing the girl, began courting her again and mocking her relationship with Mike, but she simply sent him away. There were cameras everywhere, even 3 in the bathroom. The head of security, Evan, was upset. One of the victims was his friend. Barry seemed to want to cheer him up, but quickly changed the subject, asking Evan for the keys to the building's weapons storage room. Evan was the only one with these keys, and he refused, which created tension between the men. The air conditioners in the building stopped working. Bad and Lonnie went to inspect the system. At that moment, newcomer Denny was hiding nearby. The voice sounded again, announcing that no one was allowed to dismantle the cameras or touch the chips. There were 76 people left. The next task? In 2 hours, 30 more people had to be eliminated. If this did not happen, the game boss would eliminate 60 people. Panic among the employees grew significantly. Wendell and the others began collecting knives in the cafeteria and turned on the fire alarm, naively hoping that it would send a signal to the fire department. Of course, this would not happen. Lonnie was panicking, and Bud couldn't calm him down. Suddenly, Lonnie struck his colleague with a wrench, so hard that he passed away instantly. Denny witnessed the scene, and Lonnie noticed her. She tried to run, but he blocked her path. She shoved him, and he fell onto sharp spikes. 2 down in just a few minutes. The discussion continues in the cafeteria. Barry hinted that it was time for everyone to start following the game, as it was their only chance to survive. As a pacifist, Mike was strongly opposed to these killings. He did not want to obey the rules of the game. Leandra leaned toward Barry's position, but ultimately wanted to try hanging bright posters on the roof so that they would be noticed if anyone drove by. Barry criticized the idea because the location was too far from the city. Barry is a former Special Forces soldier, and his colleagues pointed out that not everyone here is as trained as he is to take part in this slaughter. Barry got angry. Most of them went to make posters with Leandra. Barry, Wendell, and Terry stayed behind. Barry urged them to start playing by the rules and eliminate the others, justifying it by saying that they had to survive because their children and wives needed them. Marty, who had previously been very calm, began to lose his mind. He started to think that the water was toxic and was causing them all to panic, so he simply poured it on the floor, Mike argued with Leandra. He didn't like her phrase about being open to options, and the fact that she almost approved of Barry's idea to obey the rules. Suddenly, Evan, Mike, and Leandra noticed that the soldering iron that had been lying in the central hall was gone. Wendell had taken it. The 3 men are trying to melt the lock on the door where the security service keeps their weapons, and then Barry won't need Evan's keys. Barry explained his actions by saying that they would simply guard the weapons so that no one could get to them. But everyone understood. They wanted to arm themselves to eliminate the participants. An argument ensued, and Evan pulled out the gun he carried as head of security. Mike quickly calmed Evan down, and Wendell continued to melt the lock. Suddenly, Mike grabbed the gun and shot the gas torch cylinder.
That was a stupid move.
And Mike warned everyone about the 3 antagonists: Barry, Wendell, and Terry. Leandra called Mike stupid for getting into a fight with someone as dangerous as Barry. In her opinion, the main thing now was simply to survive. Mike reassured the girl, and he and his colleagues went to the roof to hang up the posters. As soon as they did, soldiers came out of the hangar and started shooting at Mike and his colleagues. One poster fell. A voice announced that if it happened again, they would blow up the chip. Mike resisted and tried to hang the second poster despite the ban, but his colleague stopped him to save his life. Only then did Mike begin to wonder if this job had seemed suspicious from the start. He suspects that the government is behind it and that all this time, it has been a deliberate experiment on people. Leandra interrupted his thoughts. The 3 of them, along with Evan, were going down the stairs when Barry suddenly burst in and hit Mike with a fire extinguisher. Barry took Evan's gun and, threatening him, demanded the keys to the weapons storage room. Evan threw the keys down the stairs, and Wendell stabbed Evan. Wendell also threatened Leandra, so she had to go with them. Terry was stunned by the events. Evan was his friend, and now he was dead. Barry finally unlocked the weapons cache and distributed the weapons to his allies. However, he kept most of the ammunition in the cache and with himself. One of the men saw Denny in the basement, but pretended not to notice. On the stairs, Mike came to his senses. He was alive. The first thing he saw was Evan, but he was no longer alive. Wendell was walking down the stairs. Leandra watched this horror as people were led to their execution. Suddenly, Barry made an announcement. He ordered everyone who has family with children under the age of 18 to step forward. Next were those over 60. He warned that those who resisted would be eliminated, but there were still not enough people to complete the task.
So we need order.
Barry began randomly selecting people from the group, and those who refused to obey were eliminated on the spot. Barry also selected Mike to join the line. Barry eliminated people one by one, and Denny heard all the commotion from the basement. She came out, saw the whole scene, and went back so she wouldn't be noticed. Mike decided to act. He saw Terry panicking and crying from everything he had seen, and Mike asked for the gun. However, Barry ordered Terry to shoot him. At this tense moment, Denny suddenly turned off the lights in the basement to stop the horror. Everyone ran wherever they could. Complete chaos ensued, and people were killed indiscriminately. A colleague spotted Denny and called her to follow him to the elevator. They managed to get into the elevator shaft through the access hatch. Suddenly, a voice announced that there were 2 minutes left.
So far, you've killed 29 people.
With one more to go, Terry walked around the office looking for those who were hiding. Leandra was there, and she had detached a metal element from the office desk and injured him. But in the end, she did not eliminate him. Taking pity on the man, he apologized to her. Time ran out, and a voice announced that 31 more people would be eliminated by the chips because the task had not been completed. One by one, the chips exploded, including Terry's. The voice announced the final stage of the game. Over the next hour, whoever eliminated the most people would be saved by Belko's management. The current score was, Barry was in the lead with 11. Wendell had 7.
Begin.
The chaos intensified. One of the men even hid in a freezer to escape the chaos. Barry, riding the elevator, noticed Denny talking to a colleague and shot at the hatch. In the commotion, Denny managed to jump onto a ledge in the shaft, and her colleague was crushed by the elevator as it went up to the top floor. The elevator got stuck because of the body, and Barry was trapped inside. At that moment, he couldn't continue eliminating the other participants. Leandra had a gun with her and met Marty, who shared his plan with her. He was collecting explosive devices with chips from the bodies of the dead, so that he could then blow up the door. Leandra approved of the idea and wanted to get Mike involved. She went to the communications room and announced a message to Mike over the microphone, hoping that he was alive, and asked him to come to the first floor. Mike heard this and immediately headed there. Leandra found some water in the cafeteria and saw Wendell frantically finishing off a man who happened to be her friend Tyson. She shot him and, in the chaos, finished Wendell off with an axe. On the first floor, she met Mike. Meanwhile, Barry, with great effort, opened the elevator door, and Denny managed to jump back onto the roof of the cabin. Suddenly, one of the fellow hunters threw a Molotov cocktail, and the floor was engulfed in flames. Denny descended from the shaft into the elevator, but as soon as she reached the floor, Barry met her and eliminated her. Leandra was wounded. Barry had shot her as they fled from the fire. Mike reassured her that everything would be fine, but it was useless. She was barely breathing. Mike carried her and hid with her in a closet. She said she loved him, and those were her last words. The girl was gone. At that moment, Barry entered the room. Mike seized the moment. While Barry had his back turned, he ran out of the room and hid in the next one. While Barry was looking for him, Mike attacked. Now he was fighting the former Special Forces soldier with his bare hands. Mike managed to fight back, hitting Barry with a microphone. He used whatever materials were at hand, grabbed a tape dispenser, and Barry with it, avenging Leandra. Suddenly, the boss's voice rang out.
Congratulations, Mr. Milch.
Mike Milch is now the last employee of Belko Industries. 2 officers took him outside and led him to the hangar. There, he saw with his own eyes the person standing behind the microphone and the chip control panel, the boss. The first question that came to Mike's mind was, "Why? Who are you?" The stranger explained that he was part of an international organization of scientists. He said that social researchers need to be given the opportunity to study human behavior in real life. Mike froze, staring at the surveillance cameras that showed the entire building. The stranger began the interview. He wanted to know what emotion described Mike's current state. And then something happened that no one expected. Earlier, Mike had helped collect explosive devices from the bodies of the dead for Marty's plan. While interacting with the officers and the unknown Big Boss, he discreetly attached these devices to their clothing. Mike was not strapped in, just sitting freely on a chair. He ran to the panel and pressed all the buttons on the devices except his own. The boss begged him to stop, but Mike finished him off. Mike left the hangar, saw the sky again, and breathed in the fresh air after everything he had been through. This was just one of many experiments conducted by Belko Industries, but Mike managed to break the rules of the finale. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the Movie Fist channel and like the video so you don't miss out on new, exciting movie plots.